What's up, guys? I'm glad you're back for another discussion about the attributes of God. I'm Paul, and this is Pauline Theology, and in this discussion on the attributes, we're going to be talking about God's spirituality. Now, when talking about God and his attributes, I don't think we readily see or too often think about his spirituality, his incorporeal realness. But we should, man. See, let me say first that God being spirit should inform our worship. This is what Jesus said when Jesus was talking with the Samaritan woman by the well about worship. He informed her that it's not a physical location in which we need to find God, but it's a stirring of the spirit grounded in the truth that God finds those who truly worship him. It's not a place because the nature of God being spirit means he's everywhere. But worshiping God is a posture or position. Now let's jump into what the scripture says about God and spirituality, and then we'll move back to the application. God being spirit entails that he is invisible. There's numerous scriptures that speak to this. Jesus says no one has seen the Father. John says no one has ever seen God. And Paul in a poetic doxology says to the King of ages, immortal and invisible. In the days during the Old Testament, idols were images of creation. However, this is not the way it is with the one true God. God prohibited the Israelites to never make an image of God. This is because his image is not in anything of this world. He cannot be compared to or contained in the things of this world. This is one of the things that makes God so unique. In a time where people were looking at creation to find a God, God revealed himself and said, make no image because there's nothing in this universe like me. This kind of reaches back to our study on holiness. So a question that might be posed would be, if no one has ever seen God, then why does the Bible say that Moses spoke to God face to face? Or we got the vision of Elijah? Or maybe even when Abraham talked with God? Well, these occurrences are called theophanies. They are manifestations of God. But let's take that example of Moses for a second, okay? When Moses asks to see God, he tells him that no man can look upon his face and live. That cues us into something right there. See, when he does manifest himself, Moses has to hide in the cleft of the rock, and he sees only the train of God's robe. What this scripture is implying is that God in his completeness cannot be seen. Paul says that God dwells in unapproachable light. God's glory is just massive. Because of that, when God manifests himself, he can't reveal himself in all of his glory. So the scripture that talks about no man seeing God, they're saying that no one has seen God in his fullness. Now, another thing we can talk about and should discuss regarding seeing God was spoken of in the Moses passage. Scripture says that Moses saw the train of God's robe or his back. Well, if God's invisible or has no image, then how can Moses have seen the back of God? Well, we also see other pictures of like this in the Bible. Scripture says that God's eyes go to and fro to strongly support those whose heart is steadfast on him. Scripture says that the arm of the Lord is not too short to save, or his ears not too dull to hear. In all these passages, we must realize that these are anthropomorphisms. Now, we talked about this in another video on God's immutability. Anthropomorphisms are just ways to describe God's action in human terms. God in Scripture uses this language in order to convey a message that we can understand and relate to. If we were to think about those scriptures in a literal way, then we would also have to say that God is a bird, and he definitely ain't that. The psalmist declares, keep me in the apple of your eye, hide me in the shadow of your wing. But we would not do this because we understand that these are only to convey a message. It's a figure of speech. So why is it important for us to understand that God is spirit and invisible? Well, it's key when understanding God's omnipresence. Because he's not a physical being, but spiritual. He can be anywhere at any time. Material is limited to time and space. However, spirit is not. So God is not constrained or confined to any particular place or time. Therefore, when he says he will never leave us or forsake us, man, we can be rest assured that he is keeping that promise. When God says that he will be with us always, man, we can definitely hold that truth because he was always with us. But it also means that the only way to see and know the Father is through Jesus. That when we come to him and worship, our true worship is through his spirit within us, uniting us to Jesus, giving us access to the Father. Because in order for us to see him, we must be like him. But we will be like him one day, for God has promised to transform and conform us to the image of his son, Jesus. And that's exciting, guys. Well, I'm glad you checked out this video today, and I hope that it helped you in your journey to know God. Share it if you think that it will help someone else, and also like it if you feel like it encourages you, and subscribe if you haven't yet. I can't wait to see you back when we go over the next attribute and grow closer and closer to the heart of God as we continue our study on the attributes of God.